I'm going to show you yet another technique from the Trolldom tradition, which is used both to do divination, which is called spådom in Swedish, and to cure a person. Now, it can be used for any kind of problems. In the old days, the problems were more related to the person's at that time, different diseases, different problems with the cattle luck or the farming luck or stuff like that. If they had that destroyed, they could go to a klok and get it removed. Right? This is one of the methods used. Now, this is still very popular in Scandinavia, and it's used for everything from fear of flying to removing dimples to curses, stuff like that. Anyway, I'm not going to talk so much about it. I'm going to show you how to do it, or one way to do it. Now, I have no idea what this method is called in English, so I won't say it. But basically, you'll take some tin, like this. Now, in the old days people used lead, but I think that's a bit too toxic, so I'll use tin. Some people use wax, but yeah, that's their choice. Now, you melt this tin here, put it on the stove, you melt it down. Now it's going to probably melt pretty fast. And since I don't have the person that I'm going to work on, because this is real person I'm going to show this on. Now, this person has a serious problem with the curse, but she was unable to come here, so I'm using one of her shirts, right? Now, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a needle, or a pin I think it's called in English. Should be unused, completely unused. And I got some well water here. It should be taken from a well which is not in use for cooking or stuff like that. And then I'm going to pour it in here. Now, since she's not here, I'm going to use one of these. It's called trollöga in Swedish. I think it's in English that becomes a troll's eye. Now, this is because the person is not here, so I'm going to use this hole to get to her with this work. So I'm putting in my little pin, the bottom here. I'm placing the eye over it, like that. And it takes a little while to melt this, so I can speak a little bit more. Now, if the person were here, I would have let her take a seat on this chair, and I would have put this over her head, because, you know, it can, when you put in the warm tin, the water can, you know, so that's pretty uncomfortable for them. So I would have put it over her and then steeped, oh, it's not called steeped, something else. Done this thing over her head. Some people use old formulas when they do this. I don't. But what's going to take place is that I'm going to first divine from what element this curse has come through. It's very old, this way of doing it, and it's basically, you rarely use fire well, nowadays you use fire because people cast spells through fire, lighting candles. But in the old days they used the weather, or it was the water, or it was from the earth, right? Could also have been from a place where this person had passed by. Someone placed something on the road and they got this thing, or they happened to piss in the wrong place in the woods and offended some of the forest spirits. So I would have asked the person, where do you think this, when did this happen? What places were you at? And for each place I would think of it when this would have been melted, when I pour this over the shirt. And depending or not, if this melted tin got stuck to that pin in there, when it does, you'll know that this was the place, right? And if she was here, I would then take the water and I would wash her down with it and brought the rest to the crossroads. Three-way crossroads are the most common and popular in Scandinavia for this. But there are other ways to do it. Depending on the element from where this curse have been cast or thrown or whatever, you place the remains on a place which has a relationship to that element. So for example, for the weather, or which is nowadays called the wind, you would have placed it high up on a mountain, pour the remains there. Or if it was, if the client mentions, yeah, I passed by this old lady who's got the evil eye and I'm sure I got it from there, well then she would have taken it herself and poured it outside that old lady's house. And hopefully, well, it's quite harmless if it wasn't this old lady, so a little bit of water on the pavement outside her house wouldn't hurt, right? So let's hope this has, yeah, it's starting to melt. It's a bit slow because the firewood is slightly wet in there. This method was mentioned in a book in the 14th century called Själens Tröst, or The Comfort of the Soul. It was originally a German book, but it got translated by some monks to Swedish. And it says, don't do this, don't do that, and don't do this particular method. So it's been popular in Scandinavia since God knows when. When you collect the water from the well, make sure you put the cap on underneath the water. Otherwise, you know, spiritual things can go into the water. When you pour this over, and as I'm going to show you soon, you focus on the particular element or particular place. Keep that in mind when you do this. For each time, if it doesn't get stuck to the pin, well, then you have to do it with the next element or the next element or the next place or the next place and so on until it sticks, right? This is not the only way to do it. There are many ways to do it. They could, for example, you could place the client on a bed and you'll do this 3 times, once over the head, once over the belly, once over the feet, and you put it underneath the bed and the person sleeps on it. The method is usually then called to slå ner, to strike down, which means that any problem or disease goes through the person and into that water. It's a very common way of doing divinations for a whole year as well. People used to do it on the New Year's. It's almost ready. On the New Year's, and then the first steep should always be for the tomte, the spirit of a certain place, the caretaker of your house, for example. Let's say in Scandinavia, many people believe that there is one spirit that helps you at home, right? Usually, if you have a farm, If you don't have one, you can go by one of the crossroads and so on and so forth. Anyway, the relation between spirit and humans at the place where you live, that's the first one to divine. Because if you got trouble there, you've got trouble. And of course also the ancestors, the same thing there. You could make this the first one for the ancestors. And then the second one would be for